This is Lane Brown, Brenna Belts, and
Kay Bolinger.
For an interview for the oral history project at the Marshall High School.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Terre Haute, Indiana in 1950.
Who were your parents and your siblings?
Okay, my parents were Norma and Arthur Reynolds. My sibling was my brother David. He now lives in California.
Do you see him a lot?
Probably once a year, something like that.
Where did you live?
All my life I lived in Terre Haute, so I've never lived, other than when I did my student teaching, or I've always lived in Terre Haute.
What was your neighborhood like, your childhood neighborhood?
Everybody knew each other. I think that's probably different. That's something I could say even at my age as opposed to the older teachers. We all knew each other. We all knew our neighbors. Now I know very few of my neighbors today, so there's a difference.
Has the neighborhood changed, like a bunch of more housing?
For the bad,
Really?
unfortunately, yes. I don't know if you know where Harold's Beauty Academy is, at 22nd and Wabash in Terre Haute or not. It's close to the Kroger store.
Okay.
And it was a normal residential neighborhood when I was growing up, but now it's, kind of deteriorated pretty drastically, so I don't even drive by. I don't even want to see it anymore.
What kind of chores did you have to do when you were a child?
I was probably spoiled. I really wasn't required to do a lot of chores, but Mom was one of these people that had a lot of company. So I would always help her, especially then. Like, if it was to set the table, do the dishes, help with the food, that kind of a thing. That was more my
So just line. Whatever came
if
about.
It was, yes.
Not
if it was necessary and she needed
thing,
help, she grabbed me. That was more or less. But she didn't say, okay, you have to do this, this, and this. But she'd say, come help me with this, knowing we'd have company or whatever.
Yeah.
Something
What kinds of foods did your family like to eat the most?
Gosh, thinking back, I thought of that when I saw that question. My mom was a stay-at-home mother. My father worked on the fire department, which was not a huge salary in those days at all. And so, for my brother to be able to, go to college, he went to Rose-Hulman, though mostly on scholarships. And for me, eventually, to go to Indiana State and everything, they did that on one income. So our food, Mom would make things last. Like, for instance, if we had hamburger, she'd sometimes stretch it out for a couple meals. She'd take the hamburger and make maybe with spaghetti and take half of the pound and fix it, and then the next day she'd fix it with something else. So, but she was a great cook. So
it didn't matter.
No, it didn't matter. She'd bread the round steak and she'd slice it very, very thin, so that would last, several meals. Excellent cook.
What was your favorite thing that she made?
Probably either that or the meatballs, because
really?
she's an Italian, and some of her Italian cooking was the best.
I'm sure that was great then.
Yeah.
So, where did you go to high school?
Gersmeyer High School. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Chauncey Rose was there for a good while.
Right.
Now it's Boys and Girls Club, I think. So in that area.
What memories do you have from your school?
From high school?
Yeah.
Probably still, football games were probably my favorite still, Memories, my high school French teacher, I'll never forget her as long as...
So, did you play any sports in high school, or...?
Really, girls didn't play except in PE.
Really?
I said that was as far as it went. There were no girls' sports.
There weren't any?
No.
No volleyball, or...?
No.
Huh.
How about, were there club sports even?
Well, they had Girls Athletic Association, but as far as to play basketball or whatever, no.
So, were there any pro female athletes then?
Not really, no. I think our big things were, like they had Y-Teens, which was a club, an organization. Like I was president of French Club, I was in that. And those type of clubs, but as far as no girls' athletics at all other than in PE.
Really? What was dating like?
Dating like?
What's changed? What do you think has changed from then to now?
The money.
Really?
The money. Because as far as doing things, I think I mentioned to you earlier, we did the same things. We went out to eat, we went out to the movies, we'd go bowling. we did cruise Wabash. We'd go out and cruise Wabash and park our cars, and they had a couple of restaurants, Sonic.
Mhm.
And everybody'd pull their cars in and they'd see all their friends. They'd cruise Wabash, so that might be a little different. But as far as most of the activities, they were pretty much the same. But I'm guessing gas was something like 35 cents a gallon.
Right.
And movies were probably $1 or less.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know exactly, but
Right.
probably
A lot
I'm
more
guessing.
expensive.
Movie
So
tickets
now-
are skyrocketing.
Terrible.
It's-
It is. And if you want any food at the movies, then
Yeah.
Yeah, because back then you could get popcorn for 50 cents maybe or something, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
it's a lot. That's a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What did you like to do for fun?
for fun.
Yeah, just
What would you do on a Friday night?
On a Friday night, a lot of times play cards. Because I was a big euchre fan, so I'd play cards sometimes, and we got into hearts and pinochle, and we'd play card games, or we would go to the movies, and those were some of the things we did for fun.
yeah. We still go to the movies, but I feel like cards are.
Euchre's making a
Kinda
comeback
dying.
though now. I
It
feel like.
is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I
lot of
mean,
people
my
do.
grandparents and they've always taught us cards and everything. So my family does, but I know.
A lot of kids know.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially in Illinois, this might be an Indiana thing, but I know that euchre, a lot of people played euchre in Indiana. I came over here and people hadn't heard of it.
Yeah.
Really,
You know.
Right.
it's definitely a Midwest thing.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. I think
I
so.
don't think other parts of the country know about it.
Because my mother, as old as she is, and back at her time, they had a pinochle club, and they would play pinochle, which is pretty difficult, but that's
Yeah.
some of the things we did.
Yeah.
When and where were you married?
We were married at First United Methodist Church in Terre Haute, married in 1975, so we're coming up on 41 years.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
That's awesome. When you were in high school, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you have it
Not
like
really. I said, my French teacher that I mentioned
Right.
earlier said that she thought I ought to be a French teacher. And so, that makes your head swell when you've got a teacher tell you that. So when I went to college, French was my undergraduate major. But then realistically, when you graduate, they don't need that many French teachers in a particular town, and I really wasn't able to move. So I was kind of stuck. So when my daughter was small, I stayed home with her, and then I went back and took graduate courses in English, and then that's how I ended up here at Marshall High School, was teaching English.
Do you think learning the French language was a lot harder than maybe the English language? Which do you think is harder?
I think English is harder.
Really?
Because there's so many rules.
Right.
There are so many rules, and people, I sympathize with kids that struggle with English, because I told them, I said, I think it's hard. And sometimes there are things that you know in English, and they ask why, and I said, I don't know why. It's just the rule. It's just the rule
Yeah,
that you
some
have to
things you
follow.
just can't
Some things you can't.
explain.
Some things you can't explain, but some things you cannot. You just know that it's a rule. So,
Yeah. So what did you like about teaching
The kids.
the kids?
The kids and the teachers. I said, I was telling Mrs. Daly earlier and some of the other teachers, I said, I miss them terribly. And probably there are times I wished I'd stayed another year or two. But I didn't, and all's well. I like being off too, so both have their advantages and disadvantages.
Did you dislike when parents would come, and did they ever come and complain to you?
Not very often.
Really?
Occasionally I did, they did, but most parents were really sympathetic towards the teacher, which I'm grateful.
Really?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. They would say, I don't have any sympathy for my student once I've explained the situation
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
It was, no sympathy for the student anymore. So, I had very few complaints, during the teaching, and a few, but I think that just goes with the territory.
Do you think that's something that's changing now, that the parents are more on the student side than the teacher side?
I don't know that. I think maybe sometimes, but I think that's sometimes because they don't talk to that teacher. They'll just hear the student, but then they don't try to get the teacher's
Yeah,
side.
we'll take one side
But
of
it's
the
just
story.
one side of the story. And a lot of times, if they actually sit down with their student, maybe that can help the teacher as well as the student and the parent. So I think that's the issue right there.
Yeah.
Sometimes the parent doesn't hear the teacher's
There's
side
no
of the story.
communication,
Yeah.
there seems to be a lot of, like today, there's a lot more teacher shortages, like people not wanting to be teachers. What do you think that is? Is it
So many things. I said, first of all, benefits are changing and not for the better.
right?
And in Illinois, you've probably heard that there's a crisis in Illinois. I think that they have been trying to get it passed that teachers have to teach longer. And their retirement benefits probably aren't going to be as good. And so it's kind of a scary thing. It's not an incentive for people to teach because, you know, the salary's not that great to begin with, but most of us go into it because we like it.
Right.
Yeah.
But then they come along with other restrictions and other things coming along, you know, like I said, this retirement age or this retirement package, you know, and I think that discourages people. Then all the state requirements that they put on teachers. I don't think kids or parents realize that a lot of times you are taught things not because the teacher necessarily would like to teach them, but because the state wants it to be taught.
Do you feel like you don't get to choose at all
Oh,
what's taught anymore?
we do.
You do?
But, I mean, most of us, I think, still do anyway, to an extent. But
Yeah.
still, there are things that we know that we have to teach so that the kids will do well on the dreaded state testing,
Yeah.
you know. So that's a lot of things that discourage teachers too. But, you know, I think most of us will go ahead and try to temper a little bit of both and, you know, and still teach what you want to teach. Because then it takes the fun out of it
Yeah.
for the teacher and the kids.
Yeah, there's nothing fun happening if you don't get to teach what you want.
Right.
Do you have a most memorable teaching experience, or like a student that did something that you thought was awesome, or?
Oh, I've had so many students do awesome things. You know, if I look back over it, wasn't one of my students in particular, but a student here at Marshall, Ben Livingston, has been on Broadway. And so several of the teachers, including Mrs. Daly and some of the other teachers, Mrs. Maurer, we all went to New York.
Oh, that would be
That's
so
awesome.
much
And it
fun.
was fun. And we got to see him in New York, so there was a Marshall grad. One of my students is now a diplomat working for the Foreign Service. And, you know, when I think, and another student has been an attorney in New Jersey, and she's getting ready to move back to Avon, Indiana, so a big change for her. But, you know, when I think of what these kids have achieved, and even some of the kids that maybe don't have those high-powered jobs, I said they're still doing some really successful things and raising good families. And so, you know, that's what stands out in my mind. And I keep on Facebook about every day. And for that reason, you know, I see what they're doing, and it's pretty amazing.
Well, it's great because you influence those kids and just.
I hope so. I don't know, but I still keep in touch with them, and I miss them.
Yeah.
So.
Just like your French teacher, you did that to them. So
I hope, but you know, they were great kids. Best part of the job.
that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Are there any historical events that stand out in your mind?
Now I was really little, but I remember John F. Kennedy.
Mm.
I was in elementary school, I think at the time, and he came to Terre Haute. And I remember, well, I told you I lived behind Haroldsby Academy. We heard all these sirens. And so my mom was eating a piece of pie, and I remember that because actually Kennedy turned and laughed at her when he saw her. But we went over across by Harold's and stood there and watched him go by. And he looked at Mom and laughed.
Because she took her pie out.
Because she took her
with
pie out. She was eating it as she was watching him. And so that's an event that stands out. And Richard Dixon, I shook hands with him. I don't know if that was a great thing or not. But I did shake his hand at Holman Airport when he flew into Holman Airport.
Wow.
And then about 8-9 years ago when Hillary ran for office the first time, this is hilarious, but I was supposed to take my mother to the doctor or something, but I found out Hillary was going to be at the airport. So I go out to the airport, and I keep waiting and waiting, and all the Secret Service are out, and all these big people. Well, I knew it was getting time for Mom's doctor's appointment, so I'm sitting there looking at the watch, and I said, I've got to go. So my husband's on the phone, and I said, Nick, I said, I'm going to miss the whole thing. So he goes out to the airport, he stands there, and here comes Hillary, and she walks right to him. And he says, Kay, he says, you're not going to believe it, she's standing right in front of me. And I said, oh, you are telling me a story. And he said, I'm not. And I said, get her autograph. So I've got a piece of paper, it's an old scrap of paper, it's all I had, and it's got Hillary on it. So he got to see her and I missed it. So that's a historical events that stand out in my mind.
So do you like politics then, or are those just?
Well, right now it's real scary for me.
Yes.
So I'm not going to get into that, but I'm not really happy with anybody. But as far as politics, no, but still, it was kind of nice to see those historical figures, even though, now I think Kennedy was a good president. Nixon maybe not so much, but it was still fascinating
Yeah,
when
it's
I saw
cool to
him.
meet them.
Yeah. So.
So you said you went to Indiana State, right?
I did.
How do you think Indiana State's changed since you've been there? Has it grown dramatically, or is it?
A lot more, it's taken a lot more of the city, obviously. The buildings downtown, which are a good and bad thing. It's good to make the downtown alive, but I have a nephew, well, not a nephew, a cousin. I've got several cousins that are police officers. And one in particular says he's being sent there all the time with, crowds of kids maybe congregating where they're not supposed to be in the openings of those buildings or whatever. So, I think it's going to cause its problems, but it's also going to have its benefits. And I think once the buildings are there for a while, I think things will calm down, and I think it'll be better.
What size was it when you went there?
Well, now, as far as size, it was probably just about as big as it is now, because you got to remember, Vietnam War was going on, and people were going whether they wanted to go to college or not, because they were trying to avoid the draft. So it's probably size. It was probably, I can't guess, 12, 13,000 maybe. It was a big number. So it's probably not that different.
How would your classmates remember you from your high school days?
Oh gosh. I was pretty theatrical, I guess. They might remember that. I remember doing Cinderella in French and flying across the gym on a rope because I was floored. But so they would probably remember that. I was pretty outgoing, I guess. They would probably remember that. I wasn't shy.
So you would be someone that they would remember. You wouldn't be the kid that was
maybe
looked over.
Although our class size was a lot bigger than Marshall, because the size of our school was probably, my class was probably almost as big as your school.
Really?
So yeah. So that would be the difference, when you've got that many kids, you're not going to know everybody.
So not everybody knew you.
But a lot, I guess. So.
And then you're talking about modern conveniences, the computer.
That would probably, as far as my work experience, the computer would have to be the biggest difference. That made a huge impact on my life. Good and bad. When they broke down, it was terrible. But when they worked, it was a blessing.
Right.
And through teaching, when I'd have kids do papers or anything, it was wonderful. But a lot of people, you have to keep telling kids, or adults for that matter too, you have to really be careful with your sources when you use the internet. Because people are going to put anything out there that they want to put. So that was a bad part. But it was also great to have information at the tip of your fingers, too.
Did they have computer labs the whole time you were teaching?
No. I'm trying to think. But for most part, because I didn't start teaching until 92. And by then, they were having computers, but probably after a couple of years I was here, that I remember my principal giving us a seminar on the internet. So it wasn't always here, it wasn't always available.
Yeah.
But for most of my teaching it was. And then for my own personal modern convenience, I mentioned was the iPhone. I can't do without my iPhone.
Yeah,
my
smartphones are very nice.
And my husband gives me heck for it, but he's worse than I am. Because he'll sit there and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm on Facebook, or I'm checking this, or."
Do you think technology has helped our education for the better or for the worst?
I think mostly for the better. However, there are things that I think kids still need to know, that there are books out there to use for references, and there are other things besides computers. And it's like the calculator in math. Some people are so dependent on the calculator. Well, some are too dependent on the computer. And maybe So I think that it's a wonderful thing, but I think that there are other things out there too.
What lessons has teaching taught you?
Probably to be more accepting of people, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Because you're going to run across so many different kids from so many different backgrounds, And, there's a lesson to be learned from everyone. And sometimes a kid that you may not think might be the best student turn out to be some of the brightest people that I've seen kids drop out. It just broke my heart because I knew how intelligent they are.
Believed in them
And then a lot of times they end up going back and being very successful. And sometimes they don't. But, I think I really learned about people in this job. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. What is the happiest moment in your life that you can look back on? And just it brings happiness to you.
As far as teaching or just life
Just
in general?
life.
In general. Probably the birth of my grandson 2 years ago. That was probably the best.
Yeah.
Probably the happiest, maybe.
And so he just had his second birthday, right?
He just had his second birthday.
That's
That's probably, I shouldn't say that because I've had a lot of good moments. I said, obviously I've been married for 41
Yeah.
years, so something good happened that. But immediate happiness, I think of him.
Is that your only grandchild?
My husband has 4 other grandchildren, but they live in California, so, we don't get to see them very often. So, they're great kids, but just don't get to see them enough. So, when we have one that's Fort Wayne, which is 3 hours away, it's kind of nice.
How many kids do you have?
I have one, my husband and I have one together, and then he had 2 previously.
All right. And your mother's still alive
My
then?
mother is still alive. She just turned 100 years old.
Wow.
So,
That's quite a milestone.
she's amazing. She was bowling today when I left the nursing home.
Wow.
Yeah,
That-
she's
that is-
Still very going then.
well, it was one of those that guide, it's got a middle guide, but she was doing that just the same.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in fact, I was going to stay a little longer. I came here earlier than I planned because she was bowling, so she was busy, so I left.
Yeah.
That's
good that she's not
yeah.
sitting there and
Yeah.
just, some
No.
people when they get that age
Just don't want to do it.
yeah, they
Right.
just lay in their bed and
Yeah. Oh no, she still goes when she can.
Who was the most important or influential person in your life?
was
It's
it
a tough question.
Oh,
That's
most
tough.
influential person in my life.
Who do you think you looked up to as a role model growing up?
That would be my parents. So I guess I'd have to say 2. I can't just pick one. I'd probably
Right.
both
Yeah.
of
Right.
them.
yeah, parents teach you
Right.
everything.
Sure they do. Sure they do.
Is there any other topic you would like to talk about? We've hit all the questions, or is there anything that intrigues you today more than it did? Is there any new topics?
Can't think of a thing. I said I'm out and about and observant, but I still
Right.
can't think of anything that's too drastic.
Do you have any
Mhm.
lasting questions?
Thank you.
Yeah,
For
thank
your
you very
time.
much. I appreciate it.
Well, you're so
Yeah.
welcome. I just